Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We're not even into the month of July. I haven't even played a snap of EA College Sports 2025, and I think we're all already getting worked up about this game coming out. Now, we're all fired up that this game's coming out, but they released their top 25 offenses heading into the 2024 season. It's just a lot of head scratchers. Want to get into this list, talk about where we think teams should be stacking up, talk about some of these outliers, some of these head scratchers that we see. Before we do, and as always, just want to say I would love to hear from you guys in the comments section, some of your biggest problems. If you want to drop your top 25 offenses, I'll drop mine in the comment section as well. We'll chop it up. And if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's going to be really fun taking a look at all these different rankings that we're going to see coming out over the next couple of weeks and talking about where they stack up. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Would love to hear from you guys. And without further ado, let's get into this one. And let's start before we get into our top 25. Let's just start with some of the outliers, some of the head scratchers, if you will. Let's go with Clemson coming in as the number 10 offense in the country heading into 2024. I would start with saying the Clemson fans that we've been talking to in the comment section, it sounds like many of you guys probably wouldn't even agree with this as well. You look at this Clemson team in 2023 on the offensive side of the football, 26 points per game. That was 59th in the country, 4.9 yards per play. That was 103rd in the country. 6 yards per pass attempt. That was 121st in the country. I don't know how you can watch that Clemson offense in 2023 and possibly have them stacked in the top 10 heading into 2024. I think a lot of Clemson fans would certainly agree about that. We've talked extensively about this Clemson team. It's going to be a very dangerous team in the ACC. There's no questions or marks about that. But you look at where the strength is of this Clemson defense, Clemson team, it's on the defense. And I know a lot of Clemson fans have a lot of question marks about the offense now. With this Clemson team, they're going to get better in 2024. At least I believe that, right? Cade Klubnik going into year two, I think you're a lot more healthy at the wide receiver position, but I also think you're better at the wide receiver position. It's Garrett Riley going into year two. There are a lot of reasons to believe this Clemson offense takes a step in the right direction in 2024. In fact, I do think that happens. That being said, I'm not prepared to put them in my top 10 offenses heading into the 2024 season. Now, I think the next one we have to talk about is Penn State. And I think on the surface level, and maybe this kind of factored into the decision-making in terms of where to stack Penn State, they were top 15 in scoring offense last year. But you kind of dive into those numbers. They hung 51 on Maryland, 63 on UMass, 63 on Delaware. There were some outlier games that kind of inflated some of those numbers on the Penn State offense. And a very similar conversation that we had with Clemson. I don't even think a lot of Penn State fans would agree with it being the 12th best offense in the country. You look at Penn State, all the success they've had in 2023, it came from the defensive side of the football, because you look at this offense and you look at when they played the elite defenses in the Big Ten, they scored 12 points against Ohio State. They scored 15 points against Michigan. They only averaged 5.5 yards per play. That was 64th in the country. In fact, a lot of the scoring that Penn State did came a lot from the defense, getting turnovers, scoring defensive touchdowns. It's another one of those programs that, I think we all think Penn State's offense might be improved heading into the 2024 year. Drew Aller, kind of similar to Cade Klubnik, going into year two. You bring in a new offensive coordinator in Coach Koldenicki that we're all fired up about, but you look at the Penn State offense and say, all right, at the wide receiver position, who's necessarily scaring you? You're bringing Julian Fleming, a guy that we're excited about, but hasn't really been a true wide receiver one during his time at Ohio State. You lose a guy like Olu on the offensive line. You have to replace multiple starters on the offensive line. I look at how you project this Penn State team, even on a video game, and say, where is the 87 overall coming from? You got some good running backs. You have some solid offensive linemen coming back, but it's hard to see Penn State being an 87 overall, especially when you look at some of the teams that they're behind. If we were to ask Penn State fans, would you rather take Penn State's offense or Ole Miss's offense? Hey, we have to go score 35 points to go win a football game. Would you rather trot out with Jackson Dart in that offense or Drew Aller in the Penn State offense? I think a lot of Penn State fans would be saying the Ole Miss team, but Ole Miss comes in at number 13. Those were probably the two with the biggest question marks. Now you get into the rest of the top 25, Georgia coming in at number 1 with the 94 overall. Hard to disagree, right? You have one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the country, Carson Beck. You have an elite offensive line, a loaded running back room headlined by Trevor Etienne, some massive additions in the wide receiver room made through the portal. No question marks about Georgia. No question marks about the Oregon Ducks. You look at Alabama, Texas, Ohio State. Ohio State is sitting there at 5. I probably would bump them up. Now, do you have some question marks about Will Howard? Can he be that elite Ohio State quarterback that we're kind of used to seeing? Even if you do have some of those question marks, if you're factoring in just an overall ranking for this Ohio State offense, you look at the wide receiver position. I have a feeling why Ohio State's sitting in at number 5. I bet we see something with Jeremiah Smith coming in at like a 76 overall. And okay, I get it. He's a true freshman, hasn't played a snap of college football yet. This is coming from a Michigan fan. I watched Jeremiah Smith the last couple of years of high school. I've been reading the spring practice notes. Jeremiah Smith, as a true freshman, it's hard to see this kid not being one of the better wide receivers in the Big Ten as a true freshman. I look at Ohio State and say one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, the best running back room in the country, coming in at number 5. Again, it's 5. We're not going to throw a fit, but it seems a little bit low for Ohio State. LSU coming in at 6, good with it. Miami coming in at 7 might be a little high for some people's taste, but Cam Ward coming into this Miami Hurricanes offense, I think drastically improves it. They have a very good offensive line. They got a good running back room led by Damian Martinez. Made some additions in the wide receiver room, but also return a guy in Xavier Restrepo, who I really do think is one of the better wide receivers in the country. Good quarterback play, really good quarterback play, good offensive line play, running backs, wide receivers, pass catchers. They check a lot of boxes. I'm not necessarily too upset about Miami coming in at number 7. Now, Colorado coming in at 8, that's kind of an interesting one. I look at Colorado with the offensive skill and say, there's a lot there, right? Shadir Sanders, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, a loaded pass catcher room, right? You add guys like LeJontay Wester and Will Shepard. I think the big question is the offensive line. I do think the Colorado offensive line is massively improved from what we saw in 2023. Quite frankly, couldn't get much worse. If the offensive line is good, this Colorado offense has some serious difference makers around one of the best quarterbacks in the country. I'm probably not as worked up about Colorado coming in at number 8 than a lot of other people are. Missouri coming in at number 9, like it. Luther Burden, Brady Cook. Again, we talked about Clemson. Don't necessarily agree with that. Utah coming in at 11, I think, is a lot of contingent on, all right, what's the health looking like with this Utah team, right? Cameron, it was one of the worst offenses that we saw in the Pac-12 last year, but they were dealing with some very subpar quarterback play. You look at Utah and say, Cam Rising coming back, probably one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. Not probably, he is a healthy Cam Rising is one of the better quarterbacks that we see in the Big 12. No questions about that. You make some additions at the wide receiver position, guys like Dorian Singer. You have Brant Keithy coming back at tight end. The offensive line should be solid. It seems a little high to go from number 11, especially from what you saw last year, but I'm not necessarily too upset about that. When you look at Ole Miss, this is low. There's no question about it. I mean, you look at Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, Juice Wells, and then you look at who's calling the offense. And I'm kind of interested to see, is EA counting the offensive play calling into these rankings? Because if they're not, that's a mistake. You look at offensive play calling, it matters at the college football level. You look at so many offenses that have a lot of talent, don't have good play calling. They're normally not very good offenses. You have one of the best offensive play callers in the country leading an Ole Miss team that is one of the best talented, from a talent standpoint, one of the best offenses that we see in the country. They should be a top 5 offense in the country, at least in my opinion, I should say. Kansas at 14, sneaky good team. Not many people are talking about it. Healthy Jalen Daniels, 3 wide receivers that have been all with this program for the last couple of years. One of the best running backs in the country in Devin Neal. I think the question mark is the offensive line, but from a skill position standpoint, Jalen Daniels, the wide receivers, Devin Neal at running back, that certainly could get there. You look at Arizona, T-Mac, Noah Fafita at quarterback. Hard to argue there. NC State, really interesting one. Another one of those offenses that this seems high for me. I'll say that off the bat. You look at NC State and say they're going to get much better on offense. This was not a very good offense in 2023, but you're bringing Grayson McCall, who he's accurate. He's been extremely productive, 70% completion percentage, almost 100 touchdowns to less than 20 interceptions. I mean, the numbers for Grayson McCall are very impressive at Coastal Carolina, but I think more importantly, you have a lot of skill on this offense, right? You bring in Jordan Waters from Duke. You have guys like Kevin Concepcion coming back for year 2, Noah Rogers coming in through the portal, Justin Jolly. Is an NC State team the number 16 offense, at least in my power rankings? Probably not, but it's going to be a lot better than most people think. You look at Notre Dame at 17. I can get with that. You bring in Riley Leonard. You have a really good running back room. You make some really good additions in the wide receiver room, and you bring in Coach Denbrock from LSU. I mean, there are a lot of reasons to expect Notre Dame to get a lot better on the offensive side of the football. Texas A&M, very intriguing. We've been very vocal that Texas A&M has, at least in my mind, a really good quarterback in Connor Wigman. They have some talent at the wide receiver room. They got a really good running back room. I think it all comes down to the offensive line. That was a disaster in 2023, but you're bringing Adam Cushing, the offensive line coach. You're bringing Mike Elko. If this offensive line is a solid unit in the SEC, I could certainly see Texas A&M being one of the better offenses that you see in the country heading into 2024. You look at Memphis at 19, Seth Hennigan, they've done a really good job on the offensive side of the football. I'm not arguing with that. SMU, Rhett Lashley, a ton of talent, done the great work in the transfer portal. I can get with SMU in the top 20 as well. UCF, very intriguing offense, going to be one of the best pure rushing attacks that we see in the country, maybe a little bit low, at least in my opinion. But UCF's going to put up a lot of points, and they're going to run the football at a very high level. And they do have some talented wide receivers as well with KJ Jefferson coming in. I think KJ Jefferson is a perfect fit in the Gus Malzahn offense. I can see this unit being top 20 in the country. Florida State at 2022, kind of a lottery ticket one, if you will. I think Florida State could be a top 15 offense in the country. I also could see them being outside the top 25. It really depends on DJU and what version you get of DJU. I think on paper, a lot of teams are going to write off, or a lot of people are going to write off Florida State because you lose Jordan Travis, you replace him with DJU, who, again, really talented cat, just needs to play a little bit more consistent. You lose Trey Benson, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson. On paper, they lose a lot of talent to the NFL, and I can see why they get ranked a little bit low. Where I'd push back, Mike Norvell, Coach Atkins, they've done a really good job. They can scheme up some plays. Like, that is some really good offensive play calling that you have with Florida State, and you have a lot of talent at wide receiver. It's not necessarily proven talent yet. Guys like Malik Benson, Hakeem Williams, it's not proven yet, but it really could be a good wide receiver room. I'm okay with them coming in at 2022 or at 22 here. Oklahoma at 23. If the offensive line holds up and Jackson Arnold puts it together, this could be a really good unit. Because I look at the running back room and say Gavin Sawchuk, really good. A ton of talent in the wide receiver room, led by transfer Deion Burks, who I think could be a top 10 wide receiver in the country. If Oklahoma can come into the SEC, block it up front, Jackson Arnold plays solid football, this certainly could be a top 15 offense in the country. Virginia Tech coming in at 24. It's an intriguing team. I mean, they bring back pretty much everybody. They have Kyron Jones, who has a lot of upside at the quarterback spot. They have 3 wide receivers that are very, very good, getting a lot of NFL buzz. It seems a little rich for me, but they're going to run the football well. They can hit it, and they can push the ball down the deeper third with Kyron Jones and the wide receivers. And then probably the biggest problem I have, and that is USC coming in at 25. You see a couple teams that I just kind of head scratches are left off this list. I think Tennessee with Josh Heupel, Nico coming in. Tennessee's probably getting slept on here, but USC at 25 I think is a disaster. I mean, you look at USC, and again, going back to play calling, you have one of the best coaches in the country at developing an offense. You look at USC last year. Yeah, they didn't have a successful year, but on offense, 41.8 points per game, number 2 in the country, 7 yards per play, number 5 in the country. I don't see how you can stack some of these teams above USC. Yeah, we have question marks on the defensive side of the football, but on offense, again, you lose Caleb Williams. You look at Miller Moss, played Louisville in the bowl game, 372 yards, 6 touchdowns. We haven't seen a huge sample size of Miller Moss, But from what we've seen from him, he's been good. He was a former top 100 recruit coming out of high school. But I think most importantly, Lincoln Riley's calling the plays with a wide receiver room that is absolutely loaded. Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon. I mean, these are guys that why they're probably ranked as low as they are is because they're not all proven. And so they probably have some low ratings. This is going to be a top 15 offense in the country again. And you look at the offensive line and say, I think they're a lot better than most people expect. And so I look at USC and say, as long as Lincoln Riley's still at USC, I'm not leaving him out of the top 20, much less the top 15. He's historically had top 5 offenses everywhere he's been every single year. He's developed quarterbacks at a high level. It sounds like they're just not kind of keeping in mind coaching staffs. I mean, you look at Josh Heupel, you look at Lincoln Riley, these coaches have proven to put together phenomenal offenses everywhere they go. And I don't know why we're not putting that account into when we're ranking these teams according to a video game. I would be putting in play calling. I think that's the biggest problem we have with these rankings. Some other teams, again, Tennessee probably being left off. You look at Michigan running the football. Even as a Michigan fan, I can see why they're left out of the top 25. A lot of good offenses left off the top 25, and you have teams like Clemson or Penn State or even NC State, a team that I think gets better, but I'm not necessarily ready to put them in my top 25. Interesting rankings. I'm excited to see what the defense is. We'll break down the defense when it comes out. We'll break down a bunch of rosters when these rankings come out. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. We'll talk to y'all later.